Hi folks, for today I'll give you an overview about the base of the skull and its related foramens or openings. So let's start by looking at the base of the skull. So this is a picture of it. This is the anterior, this is the lateral, and this is the posterior. So basically it is made up of 8 bones, one ethmoid bone, one frontal bone, one sphenoid bone, and one occipital bone. The two paired bones are the temporal bones and the parietal bones. And the base of the skull contains some internal features on it. It is some of this is the frontal crest, and this is the crista galli, which serves as an attachment for your falx cerebri. This is your sella turcica, in which the pituitary gland lodges, and this is the anterior clinoid process and the posterior clinoid process, which serves as an attachment for your tentorium cerebelli. This is the internal occipital protuberance, which divides the cerebellum into 2 lateral halves. So basically, the base of the skull is divided into 3 fossa: the anterior cranial fossa, the middle cranial fossa, and the posterior cranial fossa. The boundary between the anterior cranial fossa and your middle cranial fossa is the lesser wing of your sphenoid bone. Here it is. And the boundary between your middle cranial fossa and your posterior cranial fossa is the petrous part of your temporal bone. Here it is. So let's now take a look at the anterior cranial fossa. So this is the anterior cranial fossa. I only want you to remember one thing about it. It is the cribriform plate of your ethmoid bone, because this opening transmits your olfactory nerves. So basically, the olfactory nerves are responsible for your sense of smell. So that's the only one thing I want you to remember in the anterior cranial fossa. Well, for the middle cranial fossa, I want you to remember 6. This is the superior orbital fissure, your optic canal, your foramen rotundum, your foramen ovale, and your foramen spinosum. And located between the sphenoid bone and the temporal bone is the foramen lacerum. Your superior orbital fissure transmits your cranial nerves number 3, oculomotor nerve, cranial nerve number 4, your trochlear nerve, cranial nerve number 6, your abducens nerve, and they are primarily involved in the extraocular movements of the eye. Additionally, the superior orbital fissure transmits the ophthalmic branch of your trigeminal nerve, or your cranial nerve number 5, which is responsible for your sense of the cornea. So that's the superior orbital fissure. It is located between the lesser wing of your sphenoid bone and the greater wing of your sphenoid bone. And medial to it is the optic canal, which transmits your optic nerve, or your cranial nerve number 2, which is mostly responsible for your sense of sight. In the greater wing of the sphenoid, we can find 3. The foramen rotundum transmits your maxillary division of your trigeminal nerve, and this one, posterolateral to the foramen rotundum, is the foramen ovale, which transmits your mandibular division of your trigeminal nerve, and it innervates the muscles of mastication. Posterolateral to the ovale is the foramen spinosum, which transmits your middle meningeal artery. Between the sphenoid bone and the temporal bone is the foramen lacerum, which transmits your internal carotid artery. So that's the 6 holes I want you to remember: the middle cranial fossa, the superior orbital fissure, optic canal, rotundum, ovale, spinosum, and lacerum. For the posterior cranial fossa, I want you to remember 4. This is the internal acoustic or internal auditory meatus, which transmits your facial nerve and your vestibulocochlear nerve, or your cranial nerves number 7 and 8. Your cranial nerve number 7, or your facial nerve, is mostly responsible for innervating your muscles of facial expression, while the vestibulocochlear nerve, or your cranial nerve number 8, is mostly responsible for your sense of hearing and balance. Here we can see a large foramen here, the jugular foramen, which transmits 3 cranial nerves. Number 9, which is the glossopharyngeal nerve. Number 10, which is the vagus nerve. Number 11, which is the accessory nerve. Here we can see a small opening here, the hypoglossal canal, which transmits the hypoglossal nerve, which is mostly responsible for the movement and altering the shape of the tongue. The largest foramen is the foramen magnum, which transmits your spinal cord. So, in the anterior cranial fossa, again, this is the cribriform plate of your ethmoid bone. In the medial cranial fossa, this is your superior orbital fissure, your optic canal, your foramen rotundum, foramen ovale, and foramen spinosum, and the last one is the foramen lacerum. While in the posterior cranial fossa, this is your internal acoustic meatus, your jugular foramen, your hypoglossal canal, and your foramen magnum. So this is a base of the skull. It is a model. So this is the ethmoid bone, your frontal bone, your sphenoid bone, your occipital bone, your two parietal bones. The two temporal bones and the two parietal bones. So we can see here the superior orbital fissure and the foramen lacerum, I think, but this is the optic canal. This is your foramen rotundum, foramen ovale, foramen spinosum. This is your internal acoustic meatus, your jugular foramen, your hypoglossal canal, and your foramen magnum. So, to summarize, the base of the skull is divided into 3 fossa: the anterior cranial fossa, the middle cranial fossa, and the posterior cranial fossa. The anterior cranial fossa contains the cribriform plate of your ethmoid bone, which transmits your olfactory nerves. The middle cranial fossa contains the superior orbital fissure, which transmits your cranial nerves number 3, 4, 6, and the ophthalmic branch of your trigeminal nerve. The optic canal, which transmits your optic nerve. Your foramen rotundum, which transmits your maxillary division of your trigeminal nerve. Your foramen ovale, which transmits the mandibular division of your trigeminal nerve, and the foramen spinosum, which transmits your medial meningeal artery, and the foramen lacerum, which transmits your internal carotid artery. And in the posterior cranial fossa, there's the internal acoustic meatus, which transmits your cranial nerves number 7 and 8, your jugular foramen, which transmits your cranial nerves number 9, 10, and 11, your foramen magnum, which transmits your spinal cord, and the hypoglossal canal, which transmits your hypoglossal nerve. So that's all, folks. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can mail me at dichromacy@gmail.com. Thanks and bye.